So welcome everyone to this month's ReproNim webinar. Those of you who have either joined us or perused our archive have seen that over the past 8 or so months, we have wandered through a number of the ReproNim technologies itself, from testing software to ingestion of DICOM to semantic markup and things of that sort, and training opportunities. We also want to sprinkle in, once or twice a year, some of our external collaborator folks who are working with us either directly or indirectly, and places where some of the ReproNim technologies are eking out into the real world. So this month, we are super excited to have Franco Pestilli join us to talk about BrainLife and how BrainLife, can make your life easier. So I guess without further ado, I will turn things over to Franco.
Okay, thank you very much. You guys can hear me. We've been talking already, so I hope that works. I'm very excited to be here and presenting here in my house and presenting to you guys through Zoom. I'll describe briefly the project that BrainLife represents, and then I will walk you through some of the features and the main functionality of the platform. BrainLife now, it's about 3 years old. It's coming to the end of the 3rd year. We were initially seed funded by NSF to develop a platform that would serve as an interface between the community of researcher in neuroimaging and neuroscience and the cyber infrastructure that is supported by NSF nationally. The project is focused initially on 3 main user categories. So here is where we represent people like you, or many of you, that like to code and write analyses and machine learning algorithms, and you can come on BrainLife to publish your algorithms into an app, and that it's a web service that can be reused from the community or users that access the platform. People interested in understanding disease or specific domains of neuroscience can come on the platform, and they can import their data. We're compatible with beads and at this point, but also we can import individual Nifty files. We're trying to avoid files like DICOM that might have problems with higher problems and risk of security breach and re-identifiability. Also, if you work in the domain of building clusters and getting funding by building and proposing new architecture for clusters, you can come to the platform and register a compute cluster or a site, or a center on BrainLife as a compute resource, and that allows either all the public apps to compute to use the cycles on your cluster if that's what you want, or also it's possible to register a resource that stays public, partially public from the rest of the community, so that this can be useful for an institution that cannot get the data outside of their own facilities. So BrainLife is, normally we divide the workflow into projects. That's where most of the data management happens on the platform, and I will show you that next. And apps, which are the web services I was talking to use recently. The apps are no more than GitHub repositories that often simply call shell script that can deploy Docker containers, Singularity containers, or also directly Python code or even MATLAB code, depending on the availability of the resource for the specific app. We provide computing and analysis on individual subject base, but also you can compute bulk of subjects in your project. In fact, one of the features of BrainLife that we think is most valuable, it's the ability of processing many subjects in parallel, and so you can come on the platform and upload 200 or more subjects, and they can be analyzed, reliably analyzed using all the available resources. BrainLife will find among the resources available to the platform that have been registered, the one that is compatible with the app you're trying to run, and will deploy the individual subjects on the resource on a case-by-case basis. We have a scoring mechanisms inside the platform that let you do that. We might go back to that later as we talk about apps. Also, BrainLife allows data visualization. There's two main categories of data visualization apps. One app focus on importing into the platform major software for visualization that the community already uses. So Freeview or FSLI are among some of the most used ones. And the other category of visualizers are visualizers that we are developing, and I'll show you a couple of examples of those too. What the platform does, in addition to data management, it actually keeps track of everything that happens to a data set after the data set is imported inside the project, data provenance. So it keeps track of the provenance and all the relationships between apps and data sets and the generation of new data sets, etc. So if you manage a project on BrainLife and you say you go from the beginning or raw acquisition and you keep adding subjects to the project over a few months of data acquisition, and say by the end you generate all the preliminary results that you need, you write a paper, and you can actually choose to make public some of these data products that have been generated on BrainLife. And if you do that, you create what is called a BrainLife publication. A BrainLife publication literally moves the data and makes it available for everyone, because projects can be private, and the majority of the projects indeed are private on BrainLife at this point. BrainLife publications are a specific type of example of reproducibility. They actually contain not just the data that was generated, but all the graph of provenance that accompanies the data, but also all the apps, processing apps that were used to process the data, and the apps are tracked down all the way to the GitHub master and to the GitHub branch and Git commit. The idea was to develop BrainLife in a way that would involve, as many people as possible. So part of the project is not to just develop this technology that I will show you today, this user interface, but to develop mechanisms for everyone to contribute what their expertise is. So people have been working on BrainLife to develop their own projects, scientific projects. As they do that, they have needs, they need some specific apps, and they can go and develop an app. And there's a community now that is growing on Slack channel, brainlifeslack.com, and people can come and develop what they need on the platform. So the goal of the platform is to provide open source code for much as possible. Some of the images that we have for the apps are Dockerized, and they're also compiled, some of them. But there's a fairly large documentation now and tutorials that are readily accessible, and we try to help as much as possible in developing what researchers need for their own research goals. We think this is critical in developing the vision of the project, because we want to make sure that what we're developing can be used and will be used for actual scientific papers. We have many collaborators and many people that have been in and out of the project, contributing to either troubleshooting or not. This is so far the core group of people working on the project. So each is the lead developer, and then some of the people you see here are actually graduate students and postdocs. And we have a communication person, Stephanie, that she's been helping reaching out to the community, which is always quite important in these cases. Okay, so these are other collaborators that are contributing different aspects, people with expertise in cyber infrastructure, people with expertise in algorithms and computing, and people in big data, expertise in big data and those specific domains. Okay, I'll go back up. So if you were to now sign up and log in, I can hit home, and this will bring me to the main landing page, and this is where the project has. So these are all the projects that I can see, but you can see if you log into the platform, you will see less than this. You'll see many of these have a little lock, which means it's a private project. And so somehow involved with many of these, helping at different levels. Because of that, I can see them. So that's the main page of project. A project is described as, I'll find a public project that is useful. A project is comprised of some agreements for the data access. In this case, I click on a public project, so there's some data agreement that you need to comply with. There's data access policies. There's some information about subjects. Also, the landing page of the project provides a nice feedback for people that have contributed apps or resources for computing. What you see here are all the apps. Each one of the row is an app that has been used for this project, for processing the data in this project. And each color, it's a resource, storage resource, or a compute resource that was used. And we keep track of the total wall time for each resource. And this can be useful for many of us to make reports and show that what we're doing actually is receiving attention and some sort of impact. Now, if there are publications associated with resources or the project, they will be appearing down here. And there's a little bit of social interface for commenting and creating comments. Now I'm going to click onto the archive. This is where the BrainLife data types are stored. In BrainLife, the data are abstracted into objects that are easy to visualize on an interface, but also are easy conceptually for users. And this project has many of them. In this case, there's a lot of tractography, there's matrices of connectivity, there's models, statistical models, and many of them. Some of these, for example, will be probably FreeSurfer. We did not import here FreeSurfer. I'm going to change now project so that I have a more active project that I'm more familiar with. I've been using this project for testing recently. So this is a private project that I've been working on for some of the testing we've been doing, and similar layout. And now there's different type of data type. So if I click on one of these data types, it gives me some information about the output of the data. So in this case, for example, this is a white matter anatomy data type. So it contains streamlines or connection between different. There's about 2.5 million of them here. I know where this is stored. I know who produced this. This is stored on Jetstream, which is one of the NSF-funded cloud that we use actually on Wrangler. And then I can show, here we show the number of streamlines for major tracks that are generated by these apps. And some error can show here. And interesting for every one of the data types, the data type contains this graph. And this object here was generated by taking two initial input data, a diffusion imaging data and a T1 anatomical data. And then there's been some dephasing, some pre-processing, some tractography, some alignments. FreeSurfer has been also used, and then some segmentation app that takes the tractography and divides the streamlines into major tracks. What you can do once you have something like this, you can actually download the data set. You can download a reproduce script. And this is something interesting. It's a script that download there, I'm going to replace it. And then I'm going to open it. Actually, I'll do better this way. So BrainLife also has a command line interface. I wasn't planning to talk about that today, but if you like to talk about more, I'd be happy to chat with some of you later. This is an example of a series of calls to the command line interface of BrainLife that actually will stage the data set that was necessary from the correct project and then deploy the correct apps with the GitHub commit that you need so that you can reprocess the data and regenerate locally on your machine this data set here that we've been looking at. And this comes with every of the processing we do with BrainLife. As soon as you import the data and process the data with a series of apps, the platform does this provenance tracking and keeps track of all this information. You can also visualize the data set. And here is an example of data visualization. This is one of, remember the two categories I introduced at the beginning. This is one that we developed as part of the project. And here on one side, we have brain regions, and on the other side, we have major tracks that are part of the data type that we're looking at. And I actually haven't looked at this data type for a while, but yeah, they should be looking pretty well. So that's one major tracks, the inferior frontooccipital fasciculus. Also, we have the arcuate fasciculus here that you can see, and the frontothalamic connection is also here, etc. This is just the majority of the apps for visualization on BrainLife are meant to provide immediate and quick enough feedback for the user to get a sense of whether there's good quality or something maybe needs to change. One of the parameters need to be rerun slightly different for this data set so that you get a sense of you can produce data that is actually useful for scientific purposes. We're working on several lines. One of the things we're doing, we're trying to export our this sort of information into boutique descriptors, and we're trying to map between boutique descriptors and apps of BrainLife, something that we don't have yet a lot of cycles to work on. Be very happy if any of you in the audience would be interested in working with us to develop in that direction. I think that would create a very useful interoperability between this project and other projects that are already online. Okay, so there's many objects of data, and the way these objects are normally analyzed is what we envision is that a researcher normally has some data and wants to explore what type of apps can work on the platform. So they might decide to choose, let me see if I can pick some here, a couple of, you might decide to choose a couple of apps. So I'm selecting from this subject, I'm selecting 2 data types, and I'm actually staging them for processing. I'm going to stage them into the current. I'm going to create the name for the new project, name, test, and then now, as you see, automatically the platform moved us from archive to processes. Think about this as a control panel. This control panel contains all the interface for us to submit apps. So these are different processes that have been testing over the last days, and I've been importing data from different groups and from different testing different types of apps. So here now I have a T1. I have a free surfer that was already computed on the platform. I have some diffusion imaging data. What I can do, I can submit an app, and the platform automatically look at the data type that you have staged and proposes apps that are commonly used for processing. And in this case, you could run some ensemble tractography, you could align the tracks, you can do some defacing, you can do check orientation, and there's many of others that you can use. So this is where, so let's say that we want to use tractography. I'm going to have to select which data type I want to input. You know, I've selected only that one because that's the one. I also need a free surfer, and because that's what the app requires here. And the platform will automatically complete anything that is possible to complete automatically. In this case, I only had one free surfer and one DWI, so it automatically selected the DWI and free surfer. If I had multiple of them that I had moved into processing, then I would need to manually select them. I can choose some of the parameters for tractography, and I can submit this, and now the process is going to be deployed to an available resource. At this point, BrainLife is checking, requesting which resources are compatible with this type of app, and will have a ranking system inside that will decide which resources has been most successful in processing with the app and which resource should be computing the app. And once there is, okay, so in this case, The resource is actually Big Red 2, which is one of the IU cluster made available by Indiana University. And so soon the platform will deploy a job on their PBS system that runs on Big Red. Before waiting for that app to process, I actually can go back here and can deploy other apps. And even if the new app I want to run requires the output of the one I just launched, you can do that. You can run a new app, and that new app will wait for the previous app to finish and stage the required data type, and then we process and we go on. Now, this is the main way we think processes can be studied and a pipeline can be built in the platform, so you can try different parameters and different apps for tractography. We don't think there's going to be one app for tractography on BrainLife. Some of them work better on some types of data, others on some type of data, but we provide the mechanism for people to come here and try the app and then look at the results by visualizing the outputs and the data type, and then deciding which apps is working better for their case. And once you do that, you maybe working on a few subjects, you build a sequence of steps, as I did in this case. I built through different testing a sequence of steps of apps that I like. And then once I did that, I decided that I'm going to run a matrix tractography and a matrix pre-processing, 2 apps, and I'm going to do also PRF mapping, population receptive field mapping. Now, what I moved from this tab, this is a tab that is called Pipeline. This tab actually will deploy an app on all the subjects, unless I make some, I decide not to run all the subjects. All the subjects in a project will be crawled and processed by this app. The pipeline can be online or offline. So you can have, imagine if you decide, collect some pilot data and then do some testing and decide what series of apps you want to run on your data. And then you go back and over the next few months, you collect all the data you want. Then you can create a pipeline and never had to go back to kind of click manually. These pipelines will automatically crawl any new data that will be deposited on the archive and will process at the end. Now, if you are happy and you process everything and you like to share it with the world, you can actually go onto the publication page and you can create a BrainLife publication. So you can pick a title, a description, you can tag the publication, choose a certain type of license. We have a few available. You might want to add your funding information and then add your collaborators or contributors that are automatically has to be a user on the platform. And then you can create a release. And if I submit now, this is going to create an app, so a publication, which actually means creating a record. I'm not going to do that now. Instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back now, talking a little bit about apps in general. There's different categories of apps because the majority of the projects around the platform has been developed somewhere around me and my lab and my collaborator. There's a lot of tractography here. There's a lot of pre-processing on anatomy. But recently we've been working hard to introduce more of fMRI and network neuroscience. And so here, recent apps that have been updated by Eleftherios Garifallidis and Serge. This is a group working on DiPi. So these are DiPi apps. So this is a main interface of an app. Apps contain a maintainer, contributors. In this case, Serge is doing all the work. And an app is actually, can be executed directly from this, but this is just really for testing. We don't think this is the best way to approach the interface of the platform. Apps have prescriptive inputs and outputs. So they tell you what they need as an input. In this case, there's an optional file for tractography and there's a required file for tractography. And as an output is actually another tractography file. The README file is populated automatically from the app. What is a BrainLife app? So here, I'm gonna click on this link, and what you can see now that it automatically brought us to where this app lives. This app lives under the DiPi project on GitHub. And the app is nothing more than a GitHub repository what BrainLife does, we look for this main file and we'll deploy the main file. If it follows auto specification, we'll be able to deploy that main file on the resources. So in this case, for example, we're running a Singularity container, Docker container for DiPy, and that Docker container for DiPy is running that shell script. So if we go inside that shell script, oh, I see. Well, that shell is now compiled, so it's hard to see. I'm going to change the app example that I'm using. So let me go here. So this is another app, and I'm going to click here. You see, we keep track of the version of the app on GitHub here. As it's updated, we will tell which branch we're using for this app. Now, yes, so the main script is actually running through Singularity a compile main file, and that compile main file is actually, I'm not going to open the compile, but this is the MATLAB version of that compiled main file, and this is just MATLAB code in this case that we compiled and is running a series of commands from a toolbox, and the toolbox is loaded up here for the version of the code that is not compiled. If you compile it, you don't have to license this, and it's creating some plots, and it's creating some data plotting, and it's processing some cryptography data. Now, apps also get assigned a DOI, and many of the papers that have been using BrainLife are coming with this method section where there's a table, and the table explains step by step what are the processing that have been done on the data to generate the final results. And instead of just simply writing what you've done there, you write the name of the service, you add the DOI for the service, and then people can click on that table DOI and come back directly to the app that was used. We keep track of the user using, how many requests this app has been performed, and how long it takes to compute, and also the average success rate on different resources, you know, how many times it's finished versus how many times it's failed plus finished. Many people are contributing on this one, and we suggest this sort of documentation for the app. The app has to be compatible with the BrainLife specification, which is called ABCD. And then it's compatible. I mean, there's some funding here, and then some minimal information about usage locally and non-locally. And then these are information about who's been using this app and who's been looking at this over the last few days. We populate this as we go. Okay, so we look at apps, and there's about 200 of them. As I said, we're working hard on different versions of fMRI processing, and there's nice, cool apps that are coming up in collaboration with Rick Betzel, Danny Bassett, and Fabrizio Vico Fallani. Filippi Nascimento is hired on another NSF grant. He's been developing basic nuts and bolts processing for structural and functional networks. So we're doing some pre-processing on the network. We're doing extraction on some statistics from the network. We are working on visualization. We're working on building communities out of network, and also creating null models that are really important for statistical purposes. Now, all these categories of apps here are actually automatically generated on the platform from the tags on GitHub. So if you add here an additional tag, that tag associated with that app will automatically populate here in the categories on BrainLife. So something to be aware of. If you develop your own app and you want to make sure that it's visible, make sure you add a tag, and that tag should be part of what is most meaningful for the users of the tag. They will be looking for the app. So you can search for apps here, as I did before, and apps come with little icons. You know, if you don't provide any icons, we'll automatically add one of these funny robots, but we're hoping people will actually provide nice icons that can be used, etc. And you can see, as I was clicking on apps, different apps actually are registered on different resources. This is registered on IU resources, and let me see which one. This one is registered on Jetstream. Some of the apps are registered on multiple resources. Let me see if I can find one that is a good example. FreeSurfer, it's very commonly used app, is actually registered on multiple Swarm cluster on Jetstream, but also on some IU clusters. And soon we, some IU clusters. Soon we should have also Azure back. We had a gap in funding with Microsoft, but we're back funded, and we will provide some free computing on Microsoft. All right, so project management for data management, apps for processing, and then we were talking about publications. Remember that every project allows you to create a publication, and you see that page. Now, once you publish when you create the publication will show up on this page, which is now public. This page can be accessed by everyone. And here, what you see is the people involved. You see the short topic. You see the visibility that the app has, that the publication has obtained online. And if you click on any one of these publications, you will see release 1. In this case, this paper was submitted to a journal, and then we received feedback from the reviewers, and we made changes to the data and data descriptor, reprocess some of the data, and then we create a second release. So it's kind of part of what you do normally as you do a scientific project. And these data files actually can be downloaded. If you use the command line interface, you can download them in bulk, or you can download them manually. They can be visualized. They can be, here is an example of visualization that wasn't developed by us, was developed by, I believe in this case, the MGH group. Okay, so we're staging the data so they can be visualized, and we will launch a virtual machine that allow you to explore the data. Always some uncertainty when these things happen, especially during a webinar, but so far we've been testing for a couple of years. The platform most of the time works. Sometimes it's glitchy as anything. We're moving quite a bit of data between services, and now it's starting the service. The service is starting, we're launching a container that will open a virtual environment and should appear soon, hopefully. Okay, great. All that wait, and unfortunately, this one failed, didn't open the right data file. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to change to a different data type. Let me find FreeSurfer, and then I'm gonna click on that one. I can open, and then I'm gonna click Freeview. Great. I don't want to wait for that too long. I'm actually going to move to other type of visualization and go back to that. So this is visualization that we are in the process of developing. I have to say this is still beta. It's available as a demo, but it's not completely developed. It's for fMRI data analysis on the, in this case, we're showing population receptive field, visual cortex from the human connected data developed by Benson and Kendra K. You can show different type of maps on the surface. You can move the brains in different way. And again, this is meant to provide immediate or semi-immediate feedback on the user so that you can get a sense of whether your data has been processed correctly or non-correctly, etc. Another type of visualization is about network. We're working a lot on around networks recently, especially because we got this new grant funded. And here, for example, it's a quite unique type of visualization where you can see at the same time, on one side, the matrix of connectivity, and on the other side, the anatomy that underline that matrix of connectivity. This is also beta. We're not quite funded for this, but we've been having fun developing it, just, you know, hoping to do as much as we can soon. You can see different, and you can, I find this very important. You can see sometimes that there's some of the connection that I might anatomically not correct, and I might not want to use for my counts and my statistics on the network. So I like to go back, and there's mechanism how to clean these anatomical structure so that you don't get to build matrices that contain these artifacts. For example, this streamline, it's extremely different than the rest of the group of the streamlines. Publications. Yes, publication, I showed you publication. There's been several projects on their way to be finished here, and more are to come. And we think, as I said at the beginning, we think this is really important for us. It's really important that people are using the platform. Please come and break it, right? Come and use it and find what are the problems and what the things that you would like to have, but we don't have. And because that's the only way we know that we're producing what NSF funded us to produce, which is a successful platform that can be helpful. Now, you've been talking about data type. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. BrainLife abstracts real data and files and folder into something that is visually cohesive for the users. And it helps, in that way, helps the platform understand what inputs for an app are, what outputs for an app are. There's a page dedicated to this, and there's also a Slack channel on the brainlifeslack.com channel where you can go and question and ask questions and have discussions about what a data type should be or how it should be changed, etc. What I'm very excited about is actually this page, which is called Datasets. This is a recent collaboration with the Data Lab group, Jaroslav and Michael Hanke. We're using Data Lab here, the registry on Data Lab, to actually expose many of the open data sets that are either on Open Neuro or on different projects. So for example, I'm going to find NKI. Right here, some of the NKI data sets from Michael Milham and Cameron Craddock are here. What you can do with by leveraging the powerful data lab system, you can actually automatically import some of the data that you might be of interest. You can make a new project automatically, and you can call it what you want, put some description on it. I'm not going to do that. And this time on this interface, the data sets are only exposed with their metadata, but you can actually import them, and that would mean a copy of the data into a new project, and then you can start analyzing and using everything that I showed you before. If you are interested in resources, this is the page where you will go and register or study different resources. This is which apps have been running with what success on this resource. You can see that the resource is active now. This is a Jetstream resource, is also active, and many apps have been running on Jetstream. And we provide, online feedback, some of the people running apps on this system, but also we provide some timeline of the event. And this is just a plotly, so you can download the graph and put it into your report if you need that. And finally, if you are interested, you can come here and you can register new compute resources. Most of it is automated, as long as the privacy level and the security level of the resource is mild. You need to use our public key and then private key, and then you have to generate a key pair and then give it a username, a login name, and host name, etc. Reality is most of the people that have been importing and adding resources to BrainLife have been working with us, and we've been very happy if they do that. And there's mechanism for keeping the resource associated only for a subset of the apps, so that the resource doesn't become public, but is only used to the people that have access to the app. All right, so finally, this is, I hope it's a decent overview of the platform. Finally, we have a documentation, brainlife.doc, and this is a brief description of what the platform is and what is the vision for it. This is last year human brain mapping poster that gives an overview of it, and some references to publication will come soon. There's instruction about getting started on BrainLife, how to create a project, how to create data types if needed to, how to process some of the data, how to build pipelines, some of the things I've showed you today, and how to create a publication. Besides general tutorials and instruction like that, there's also more specific tutorial. So this semester, Brett Caron, a student in the lab, and myself developed a class for the undergrads here at IU. And as part of this class, we actually taught these undergrads to use BrainLife for data processing. We assume no prior knowledge of neuroscience or programming, and the students came in with the expectation that they were going to learn how to process data, learn the basic nuts and bolts of data and neuroscience and the brain, but also not go too much into the details of any of that, obviously. And they were also exposed, ideally from the original plan of the class, they were going to collect data and analyze their own data. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't cover the last part of the class, but we're going to teach this class again, and we're pretty excited. The students were happy, except that they didn't collect their own data on their own brains, and we're going to do more of that later. So there's anatomical processing tutorials here. They walk through step by step how to do that, or fMRI pre-processing, which actually focus on fMRI prep in this case. There's also PRF, population receptive field mapping, that here diffusion pre-processing, tractography and tractometry, and then some building of functional connectivity networks and diffusion and structural networks. There's also CLI. I talk about the CLI, just don't have the time. You can install the CLI, which is based on Node.js, and you can do a lot of the command line things that you've seen through the platform. You can push data in and out, and you can deploy apps and etc. And you can see here how you can upload bulk data. If you have a project with several hundreds of subjects, you might not want to upload the data manually. And you can download the data into different formats, you know, the BrainLife original data types or the Beats data type. That's another active project. And then you can change metadata on data sets. You can do group analysis on large sets of projects by deploying through command line. Anyway, there's also more technical information here about the architecture of BrainLife. And then we're constantly looking for people to help and to join the project as either volunteering, or we have a few positions open. And soon, if you log in and register on the platform, you will receive about next week, we are sending out information about summer fellowships for people within the US. At this point, we're limited because of the visa problems that we've been having. We will should be hiring a couple of students or postdocs who is interested to help us develop some of the infrastructure or some of the architecture, or help us develop some of the apps. There's some specific project that will come out. Anyway, this is what I was hoping to show you. I'm open to questions now. If you guys have some, happy to go back and explain some of the details. Thank you for sticking around.
That is fabulous, Franco. Thanks so much for giving us that overview and inside view. That's really great. Ultimately, we're open to questions, and if people can valiantly unmute themselves to ask, we encourage you to attempt to do so. To get things started, I may take a shot at actually, I know BrainLife and ReproNim, are working, in the proposal to go forward, together. And I know you've talked a little bit about some of the data lab integration that's happened, already. Between you and perhaps Jarek, can you say a little bit about the places where, you think the tools of ReproNim and the platform of BrainLife, fit well together?
Well, so the goal is to learn from each other, right? That's what we wrote. And then I believe some of the backend or data lab will be soon using ReproNim tools. I will ask for help from Jarek here. But I think there's we are open to deeper conversation about how we could potentially use backends that are completely ReproNim driven. Right? So that would be the most ambitious and most long, might take longer. But I think we can see a future in which someone in an institution be running a ReproNim environment for their analysis, but then accessing it through an interface similar to what we have here. One of the goals of BrainLife is not necessarily to own the data, own the app. Is this vision of similar to GitHub and to Data Lab is to have everything distributed. What we are interested in is providing a window onto collecting metadata so that people can come on the platform and see that there are something going on, maybe MMGH being worked on this topic, and there are some apps developed by Satra or from some of Brent, to one of the students, and they're here. So in a certain way, we like to think about the project not necessarily as this is the right technology and this is the way to do, but more like a collector of information and display of information. So that's why we're trying to bridge gaps between this project and many other projects, like ReproNim being one. Yarek, do you want to maybe add something more technical to what I just said about the possible ways forward for that integration?
Yeah. So ways are limitless. Let's put it this way, and they could start from bottom up. Even those ABC apps or ABC apps, right? They could take advantage of tools like ND-freeze, which we developed to make those containers or apps themselves reproducible, right? Because if you tune it up, like add something, it will be a new version of an app, and maybe many critical pieces would change. So even those basic pieces would be kind of value. Then going up into, well, metadata is a big lake, and right, Repro Lake is coming. So at the moment, data led is used pretty much as accelerator to access data, but metadata is not yet used. To the degree it could be, right? And what we have in the plans is that when data led would collect more metadata about data sets, maybe BrainLife will also start to use that metadata to find new data sets, maybe even which it doesn't have in the registry explicitly, but it has an idea that, oh, there might be the data set with such metadata. And then it goes into NIDM, right? As whenever there are annotated NIDM data sets and data-led aggregates that metadata, that type of metadata would become available to BrainLife as well, right? And then maybe at that point, graph queries could be happening, right? So instead of searching for simple queries, which could be expressed with current data types, you could come up with more sophisticated queries. So there is a full spectrum of potential.
Thanks, Yarek.
Hi, I'm one of the new ReproNim fellows, and thank you, Franco, for the amazing presentation. I'm just wondering, so my university has our own computing resources, and we have all these tools installed on our own clusters, like Matrix and Ants. And I love that BrainLife reproduces all these reports, and the feedback is instant. So, do you see like everyone moving away from all these individual clusters and just going onto this cloud computing resource that's uniform and standardized? Because I don't see any drawbacks in using this versus like what's the trade-off between using your cloud-based resource and my own resource at my university?
So let's thanks for the question. There's multiple ways to think about the answer to your question. So one simple way is that your cluster could simply appear on BrainLife. And then all the libraries you have and all the apps you currently running will become a service on BrainLife. Now, you probably want, if you're working with ReproNim, you're probably pretty good skilled with, shell scripting and everything. But some of the students, the undergrads or in labs as RAs, or maybe the graduate students at the beginning, might prefer to access, apps that you might have written or someone in your app through the platform, right? So that's what I was saying before when I mentioned that you can register a resource here. So if we go here and you give me the key and the access, the host name, your cluster will become, and if you grant access to BrainLife, your cluster will become one of the resources here. So we will continue using your cluster, except through the interface. And now there's a little bit of overhead. Like if you don't like the interface, some of us don't like to work with GUI, or if you want to use command line system, you can, and then you need to learn the command line system of BrainLife to interface with your environment in the cluster. But that's kind of the simplest way that we're envisioning. And now there's other way of thinking about it. Some of the projects, especially in the hospitals, they're not public. They cannot be public. The data sets cannot be made public. So it's a little bit more complicated in case you need to keep the data inside a specific store resources, etc. There's more work that has to happen. But that was the vision, that the clusters can be plugged into the platform and you still maintain the cluster as is. We don't change any configuration of the cluster. We just come in and deploy a system, deploy a job inside your cluster the way you would deploy if you were just a user. There will be the BrainLife user that will be deployed. And then all the users of your nice scripts will be coming through the platform or the command line interface.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm wondering if any of the archives that you're dealing with are directly hosted by the NDA, and if anybody's tried to work out the permissions to getting data from there directly.
So I have been in discussion with NIH about that. I've been so one of the projects that we only have made very minor pilot for is actually in collaboration with OpenNeuro, the OpenNeuro group, and we're seeking funding for that. If you register on OpenNeuro, you should be able to actually, maybe the easiest way to go, it's through here, through Data Lab. It didn't work before. I think this one, isn't this one coming from, yeah, so this is an OpenNeuro data set, right? So we're working on the idea of importing data set from major repository. We don't see BrainLife as an archive, right? The data has to be where, on the platform for some time, but potentially the archives are already dedicated archive like OpenNeuro, the NDA. So I don't really have an answer. We are discussing how we could use, a similar system for authentication, how we can use, it's a matter of how you authenticate the user, because that's how the access to the data is managed through the NDA and OpenNeuro. And I think it's an ongoing discussion. Not a lot of solutions yet, but we're trying. Oh, here you should be able to see that if you go to the NKI samples on OpenNeuro, you can actually push it directly on BrainLife, and now you can import it. And as I showed you before, you can actually create a new project and import directly from OpenNeuro. The vision for what we want to do in the future, this is just a pilot, is to take the data from OpenNeuro, maybe from NDA, onto BrainLife, process it, and then be able to push back the products of the processing into the archives. And that's something that we'll need to work, we need to work out how to do it over the next maybe a couple of years, maybe less.
Great, thank you. Any more questions out there from listening land?
I guess I have a sort of similar question, but more towards logistics. If you're going to run like 1,000 subjects, then the bandwidth between the computing resources and the archive can matter. How is that handled?
If you go to a project that has thousands of subjects, this is, for example, one of the projects in the lab is about 1,500 subjects from the ABCD, and you create a pipeline. The way this works is that the pipelines will take the subject wherever it's stored, right, and deploy to a resource that might be the closest one or one that is actually not so close, right? So this is not necessarily the case that we're gonna go and do high throughput computing, right, and have, a Lustre cluster type of organization, Lustre system type of organization. It's meant at a different time scale here. So what we can cover is that the availability, the system allows to be aware of storage facility and storage resources and compute facilities. And we don't expect to be able to simultaneously send, 10,000 subjects at the same time. It's more thought to be a more flexible and fluid system that will take the subject when the resource is available and push it on. And sometimes it can happen that several of them go on, but many of these systems that are made freely available, they don't give us more than 30, 40, 50, 100 jobs at the time. So it will take some time. It's not going to be a super fast, high throughput system like you could do running inside your cluster. I hope that answered. Otherwise, happy to hear more.
Yeah, that's pretty much the answer I was wondering.
We have a couple more minutes. Any chance for a final question?
Yeah, I have one, Franco. This is JB.
Hi, JB.
So first of all, thanks again. That was again another tour de force. It's a great. It's definitely fantastic to see how much has been developed in actually fairly short time and not like such a big team. So I think it's really remarkable. I was having two thoughts. One is the sort of like for instance, DataLab is a entirely distributed system, and I was wondering what are your thoughts on the equivalent aspect for the apps, and if you think of BrainLife as a centralized system, or if you think of BrainLife as in the future being like a distributed system, a little bit as I get as a DataLab sort of like a philosophy. That was one question. And my second question is, I'm a bit obsessed with like the standardization aspect because when you're expanding this way, like we definitely need to sort of like come up with the right way of communicating across platforms and across infrastructures. And I was wondering what are your like actions and thoughts and like a future work on this side of things, which requires a lot of interaction at the international level and so on.
JB, can you repeat the second question? I think I understand the first, but what was the?
Right. So my second question is about the future work that you're planning or think we should be planning on standardization of description of the of both the apps, the launching of the apps, the metadata of the data set, but also of the derived data, of the like all those things. So I'm thinking, obviously, I'm thinking like sort of like a boutique descriptor, CWL, neuroimaging data model. But what's the process to get like adoption across the borders and across at the international level?
Okay, so so I think the two are related, right? So it's about how do we make an impact so that there's reuse of the products that people create. So in terms of the data side and the computing side, I mentioned that we're trying to work, neither your group or Tristan's group or my group at the bandwidth to go more than what I showed you, the idea of using Boutique as for sharing data, sharing compute and apps between. We have done work, and this is an example. So that's an app that was developed by Daniele Marinazzo's group. Sophie, actually the student, was working with us. And this is a Beads app. So here you can simply run the Beads app that they created, and the Beads app runs and is compatible with here. I am personally working on contributing as much as I can, with not very active recently for many reasons, but on the Beads derivatives aspect of it. So I think creating a standard looks like the community is moving toward supporting Beads as a standard. So that's another way. And the way I see the platform is my vision, my hope would be that people can come here and like shop, right? Not necessarily shop for buying, but shop for knowing that there's available resources online. So here things could be deployed on Zenodo, or could be deployed on different locations, could be described as Beads apps, or could be described as the different type of descriptors, but then visually can come together here and could be deployed on different systems. That's my vision, but obviously I'm totally biased because I've been working on this now for several years. Did I answer both questions?
Yes, in some respect you did, and I think it would be great to continue talking about that.
So I think one of the challenges that we should work more with, it's finding the manpower and putting together maybe a proposal, right, on something that we see through the different teams that are interested in something that, like what JP you're bringing up, to do this, right? I think in a certain way, unless we sit together and write down what the proposal is, what the goals should be, I see that proposal as like kind of agreeing on a common goal and aims. It's going to be hard for each group to do it independently because we're always running thin resources.
I agree, and I think to some extent, I think that's definitely a good mechanism. Another one would be to make sure that we link properly with the INCF, for instance, of international organizations thinking about standardization as well. Yeah. So thanks again, Franco. I have to rush for another one, but that was wonderful.
Okay, I'm mindful that our time has come. I thank Franco once again for speaking with us. You will be able to find Franco. You'll be able to find the video of this. Check the ReproNim website. Next month, we will be circling back again onto ReproNim technologies. Yarek, or one of his team, will be telling us more about containers and how to execute containers. In addition to BrainLife, there's a DataLad containers run and ReproMan containers run, and ways to operate with containers in the ReproNim environment. So thank you all. See you next month, and thanks again, Franco.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
inviting me.